The Primarchs were the ultimate genetically enhanced beings, created by the Emperor of Mankind during the closing era of Millennium 30. Their purpose was to serve as the Emperor's generals and commanders, leading the progress of the Great Crusade to unite the scattered remnants of humanity and establishing the Imperium of Man. Their genetic makeup later became the blueprint for the creation of the 20 Space Marine Legions. Engineered to perfection, the Primarchs were exceptional in every way. Larger, stronger, faster, and smarter than any regular human. They possessed the magnetic charisma and unparalleled material skills akin to the mythical gods of ancient legends. They were immune to disease, aging, and what were considered the ordinary failings of mere mortals. Each of the 20 Primarchs personified a facet of warfare. One was an unrivaled strategist. Another embodied the terror of battle. A third was a master of psychic ability. A fourth excelled in the art of fortification, and so on. The Primarchs were the Emperor's answer to reclaiming the lost worlds of humanity, adding them to his new Imperium. The Emperor's vision was to raise his sons into the finest military tacticians and political leaders in human history. They were to spread the Imperial truth across the galaxy. However, the plans of the Emperor's Great Crusade were thwarted by the Chaos Gods, who intervened and transported the Primarchs through the warp to various human-settled planets in the galaxy. Cut off from the Emperor's guidance, each Primarch developed a distinct personality, shaped and sometimes scarred by the challenging circumstances of their respective homeworlds. Despite their godlike talents, the Primarchs remained fundamentally human, and ultimately, it was their all-too-human flaws that posed the greatest obstacle to realizing the Emperor's grand vision. The ambitious, scientific endeavor to fashion the Primarchs prior to the onset of the Unification Wars in the 30th millennium was referred to as the Primarch Project. While the exact commencement date remains shrouded in mystery, Perturabo, the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, later estimated his own birth to be in the year 792 of Millennium 30, which provided a rough time frame for the project's culmination, though he was specifically referring to his arrival on Olympia. The manner in which the Emperor engineered 20 distinct superhuman genetic beings using his own perpetual genetic code as the foundational blueprint without resorting to cloning remains a riddle to modern imperial science. The process unfolded in 2 stages. Initially, the Emperor extracted a subset of his own DNA to establish a pure Primarch gene stock template. Subsequently, this pristine Primarch gene stock was further refined, differentiating into 20 distinct genetic templates that would eventually serve as the genomes for each individual Primarch. An analysis of historical data concerning the original crafting of these individual Primarch genetic sequences was conducted during the Horus Heresy by a Ravengard apothecary and a Magos genitor of the Mechanicum. They uncovered intriguing anomalies, including the deliberate gene sequencing omissions from the foundational pure Primarch genome in certain samples, while others exhibited the inclusion of non-human DNA. For example, the genetic makeup of the Primarch labelled as Subject 6 contained traces of canine-like DNA. Although the correlation between these sample numbers and the actual Primarchs of the Space Marine Legions remains uncertain, this discovery could potentially explain why the wolf-like affinity of Leman Russ and the unexpected feral mutations witnessed among many Space Wolves Astartes resulted in the creation of the Wolfen. Imperial scholars believe that the creation of the Primarchs involved more than mere physical genetic manipulation, with the Emperor harnessing various techniques of psychic sorcery derived from the warp to mould the extraordinary abilities and uncanny charisma of his superhuman gene sons. It has come to light that during the age of technology, the individual who would later become the Emperor journeyed to the world of Moloch, accompanied by several of his fellow perpetuals. Moloch was a night world located just a few light years from Terra. It would become the site where the Emperor interacted with an ancient warp gate, transporting him to a place few would dare to tread. Here, he negotiated with the entities of the Immaterium to acquire a newfound capability and knowledge, quite likely including the techniques essential for creating the Primarchs. The Emperor assigned one of his perpetuals the duty of guarding this warp gate on Moloch, ensuring it remained unused until his armies returned millennia later, during the early stages of the Great Crusade, to seize it for the developing Imperium of Man. The Emperor's utilization of such knowledge implies that the Primarchs were envisioned to be not only physically but also spiritually engineered, perhaps explaining their exceptional magnetism and charisma, which exceeded even their augmented genetics. However, these arcane methods also rendered the Primarchs susceptible to the subtle influences of chaos, as their souls radiated brilliantly in the Immaterium, inevitably attracting the attention of demonic entities. The Emperor was all too aware of the persuasive whispers of the ruinous powers, and took meticulous precautions, inscribing arcane protective glyphs on the Primarchs' gestation chambers, and creating the most formidable Geller field ever conceived around the Gene Vault hidden deep beneath the Imperial Palace in the Himalayan mountains. Despite the Emperor's best efforts, these safeguards would prove to be inadequate, for the Chaos Gods became aware of the Emperor's designs and the existence of the Primarch project. They were unwilling to permit his efforts to undermine their dominion as he sought to expand his new era of reason and scientific advancement across the human-inhabited realms of the galaxy. The dark forces of chaos somehow penetrated the defenses the Emperor had employed deep beneath the Himalayan mountains on Terra, opening a localized warp rift of immense power. The gestation capsules, each containing the potential of the Emperor's future sons, were thrust into the far reaches of the warp, scattering them across distant human colony worlds that had long been lost during the Age of Strife. It is believed that it was during this initial contact with the corrupting influence of chaos that the seeds of corruption took root within some of the Primarchs, who would later betray the Emperor and his Imperium. Whether the Emperor had any ability to counteract this malevolent influence remains uncertain. Each of the Primarchs eventually landed on ancient human-inhabited worlds, realms long isolated from the greater universe among the stars. This event posed a colossal setback to the Emperor's meticulously laid out plans. He had relied heavily on his superhuman generals to lead the conquest of Terra's dominion outward into the galaxy. Devoid of their leadership, the Emperor's millennia-long preparations now teetered on the brink of collapse. Desperate for an advantage as humanity ventured once more into the hostile galaxy, the Emperor needed a solution. The Emperor, however, was not one to be deterred by adversity. He made the decision to proceed without the Primarchs. Earlier, in preparation for this contingency, the Emperor and the scientists of the Imperial Biotechnical Division had utilized genetic material samples from each Primarch to create the initial Astartes gene seed. These stem cell zygotes had been employed to culture genetically engineered organs, which, when implanted into a normal, adolescent human being, would enable them to inherit numerous physical and mental attributes possessed by the Primarch. These organs were implanted into the most courageous, resilient, and exceptional young human warriors identified from his armies. They were the individuals the Emperor intended to stand at his side as the vanguard of the Great Crusade. Thus emerged the Legiones Astartes, known as the Space Marines, who would embark on the mission of reconquering the galaxy under the command of the Master of Mankind, even in the absence of their Primarch leaders. While an Astartes warrior could never truly replicate the full essence of their Primarchs, this technique allowed for a degree of mass production. Where the Emperor's 20 superhuman sons had taken centuries to create, thousands of Astartes could now be engineered and trained within a single decade. These advancements in biotechnology provided the Emperor with the necessary numbers of transhuman warriors to launch the Great Crusade in the year 798 of Millennium 30. It's worth noting that the genetic enhancements of the Adeptus Custodes, derived partly from the undifferentiated Primarch gene stock, are more intricate than the standard Astartes gene seed, encompassing an additional 12 elements. The source of custodian genetics, originating merely one step removed from the actual DNA of the Emperor himself, likely accounts for the Custodes' profound sense of kinship with the Emperor. Nonetheless, the custodian genetic code remains significantly less complex than each of the individual Primarch genomes, despite all of them being rooted in the same source, the pure, untainted Primarch gene stock template. As the interstellar human empire rapidly expanded during the Great Crusade, the Emperor employed his formidable psychic abilities in foresight and precognition to seek out his scattered and wayward sons across the galaxy. His goal was to reunite each Primarch with their respective Space Marine Legion. Each Primarch served as both a parental figure and an elder sibling to the Astartes of their legion. They embodied the essence of their legion's character and disposition, representing the ultimate example of their legion's ideals. The return of the Primarchs to their legions marked the zenith of the Great Crusade. Initially, thousands and then hundreds of thousands of human-settled worlds came under Imperial compliance. The conquest of these worlds was orchestrated by the rekindled Primarchs, leading their Space Marine legions with unwavering might. Much like the deities of an ancient Terran mythology, the Primarchs strode across the battlefields of the galaxy, and their power proved unmatched. Despite their superiority and apparent immortality, the Primarchs were fundamentally human and shared many of the same flaws that had plagued humanity since its inception. They exhibited jealousy, arrogance, intense competitiveness, and a readiness to hold grudges against one another, even their father, the Emperor. Whether these imperfections stemmed from their early exposure to the corruptive influence of chaos, or were intrinsic human frailties that could not be purged, even from the Emperor's offspring, remains a mystery. Ultimately, it was these very flaws within the Primarchs that led to the catastrophic Horus Heresy, plunging the Imperium into 10 millennia of stagnation, decay, oppression, and unending warfare. Following the rediscovery of Primarch Angron, the Emperor discovered that Angron had been altered by the cerebral cybernetic enhancements known as the Butcher's Nails, forcibly implanted into his mind by the tyrannical slave masters of his homeworld, New Syria. These modifications aimed to amplify aggression and rage, but were slowly consuming Angron. The renowned techno-archaeologist of the Mechanicum, Arkan Land, collaborated with the Emperor in investigating the nature of this dreadful technology, which was slowly but inexorably killing Angron. During this inquiry, the Emperor revealed to Land that he had harboured no emotional attachments to the Primarchs, as they were essentially created as tools and weapons to serve humanity's interests. When questioned about why the Primarchs referred to him as father, despite his assertion of lacking a genuine parental connection, the Emperor explained that it was natural for any creation to acknowledge its creator as its father. At the pinnacle of the Great Crusade, the Imperial Warmaster Horus succumbed to the seductive whispers of chaos, persuading 8 of his fellow brother Primarchs to join him in rebellion against the Emperor. Together, they aimed to challenge the Master of Mankind's authority and dominance. The Horus Heresy unfolded as Astartes clashed with Astartes. the fallen Primarchs led their traitor legions in a revolt against their once loyal comrades. In the climactic battle of this vast, interstellar civil war, Horus himself confronted the Emperor, along with the Blood Angel's Primarch Sanguinius. The final showdown occurred during the Siege of Terra, high above the surface, within the confines of Horus's own flagship, the Gloriana-class battleship known as the Vengeful Spirit. Here, the Emperor faced off against the War Master. Initially hesitant to unleash his full psychic might against his beloved son, the Emperor's hand was forced only after Horus gravely wounded him and killed Sanguinius. It was at this moment that the Emperor finally harnessed the entirety of his unimaginable psychic powers. In a cataclysmic clash, he vanquished the War Master, eradicating even Horus's soul from the warp, ensuring that the ruinous powers could not resurrect their puppet into a nightmarish semblance of life. Following Horus's defeat, the majority of the remaining traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror, seeking refuge within its corrupting depths. Their Primarchs, in a sinister pact, willingly surrendered themselves to the forces of chaos, evolving into demon princes. Each ruled a malevolent chaos empire within the tainted realms of the Eye of Terror, further cementing their allegiance to the ruinous powers. In the current era, nearly all of the Primarchs met fates of damnation, disappearance, or death, with a few exceptions. Sanguinius, as previously mentioned, met his tragic end at the hands of his beloved brother Horus during the Siege of Terra, and Horus himself was ultimately slain by the Emperor. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, met his demise during the Horus Heresy on Istvan V, during the devastating Drop Site Massacre. He fell to the hands of his closest brother and dearest friend, Primarch Fulgrim, who wielded a demonically infused weapon that corrupted his mind with chaos. Rumours persist that Ferrus Manus may still exist in some form, as there are speculations that the Adeptus Mechanicus aided in his cybernetic restoration on Mars. However, both the Mechanicus and the Iron Hands chapter deny such claims. Over the following millennium, the remaining Loyalist Primarchs gradually passed away or vanished. Jakati Khan of the White Scars disappeared through a Drukhari webway portal whilst pursuing the savage Xenos. There are rumours that he fell into the hands of the Drukhari while lost in the tangled mazes of the webway. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves is one of the Primarchs whose vanishing appears to have been a voluntary act. According to legend, Leman Russ embarked on a quest to find the means to cure the Emperor, seeking the elusive fruit of the mystical Tree of Life. The truth behind his disappearance is likely far more complex. Some say he ventured into the Eye of Terror to confront Magnus the Red and the Thousand Sons Traitor Legion, while others believe he will return during the Wolf Time to lead the Wolves of Fenris once more. Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists seemingly met his end during the late 31st millennium, leading a valiant assault against the overwhelming forces of the First Black Crusade. His skeletal fist now resides aboard the Imperial Fist's mobile fortress monastery, the Phalanx. His partial remains are encased in a block of clear amber on the Phalanx, inscribed with the names of every Imperial Fist chapter master since his disappearance. The disappearance of Vulcan of the Salamanders remains shrouded in mystery. Some claim he perished on Istvan V. However, Vulcan is believed to be a perpetual, like the Emperor, so even if he did meet his end, he would have the ability to resurrect upon death. Vulcan later appeared at the Imperial Palace during Guilliman's restructuring of the Space Marine Legions into chapters during the Second Founding. The Salamanders hold a belief that Vulcan will return upon the discovery of all 9 relics he left scattered across the galaxy, leading them to vengeance against the traitor legions. Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard was plagued by guilt and shame after the Horus Heresy. In an attempt to rebuild his legion's strength, he sought to accelerate the growth of his gene sons by obtaining pure Primarch DNA from Terra. However, infiltrators from the Alpha Legion tainted the genetic material. Filled with despair, Corax personally ended the lives of the mutated Battle Brothers. He then embarked on a self-imposed exile, leaving behind a single word: nevermore. On the anniversary of his departure, Corax vanished into the Eye of Terror, where he was mutated by warp energies into a shadowy entity now hunting the Wordbearers and Demon Primarch Lorgar. Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels returned to his homeworld of Caliban, only to find it in ruins. He waged a bitter conflict against the fallen angels, his once loyal followers who had turned to rebellion under Luther's influence. Caliban was heavily bombarded, leading to a catastrophic warp storm that consumed half of the planet. Up until recently, the Lion's whereabouts were unknown. He was thought to be slumbering in stasis within the Rock, the Dark Angels' mobile fortress monastery, under the care of the Watchers in the Dark. In the dying years of the 41st millennium, the Dark Angels found themselves in grave peril, engaged in a losing battle against the malevolent forces of chaos. It was in their darkest hour that their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, came to the fore to join his sons in battle once again, leading them out of certain death and into a new, uncertain future. Rabute Gilliman of the Ultramarines narrowly escaped death, but lay in stasis for 10,000 standard years following his encounter with Fulgrim's corrupted blade. He was eventually revived after the fall of Cadia in the 13th Black Crusade, and now serves as the Imperial Regent and Lord Commander of the Imperium, wielding his father's sword. It was Gilliman who led the Indomitus Crusade in an attempt to repel the forces of chaos and other Xenos threats from overwhelming the crumbling Imperium. Of the traitor Primarchs, only those who have been consumed by the dark forces of chaos remain alive today, their bodies, minds, and souls entirely under the dominion of the ruinous powers. The mystery surrounding the two lost Primarchs remains one of the most enigmatic aspects of Warhammer 40K. Most, if not all, records of their existence has been erased from Imperial databanks. Very little information is available regarding their identities, fates, or the reasons behind their expunged records. In the short story The Lightning Tower, Rogel Dawn alludes to the absence of statues for the 2nd and 11th Primarchs in their Imperial Palace, emphasizing that these plinths should remain vacant. He suggests that their tragedies were initially seen as an isolated incident, but they may have been significant warnings that went unheeded. The story leaves their fates ambiguous, and it's implied that they might have been discussed after the missing Primarchs had been erased from history. In similar fashion, in a conversation between Magnus the Red and Lorgar, it's mentioned that both Horus and Fulgrim made an oath never to speak of the two lost Primarchs, adding weight to further speculation about their ultimate fate. Regarding their Space Marine legions, there's speculation among the Wordbearers that after the removal of these two Primarchs from Imperial records, there was a notable increase in the recruitment numbers of the Ultramarines Legion. This suggests that some of the Astartes from the Lost Legions might have been assimilated into the remaining Space Marine legions. Despite various hints and speculation, the true identities and fates of the Lost Primarchs and their legions remain one of the most intriguing and unresolved mysteries in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.